Our first night in Germany we spent in Dachau, which was a terrible shock to all of us.
Indersdorff was like an island. After I was shipwrecked.
Immediately after the Second World War, in July 1945, the UN organisation UNRWA set up the first refuge for the youngest victims of National Socialism in Kloster Indersdorff near Dachau. UN volunteer Greta Fischer remembers.
The will to survive blocked out absolutely everything. The will to survive and the rage to live blocked out absolutely everything.
She and the entire UN team cared for hundreds of unaccompanied children, like this child survivor.
I was in the concentration camp Flossenburg. I was liberated and the Americans brought me to Indersdorff, Kloster Indersdorff.
Orphan Jewish survivors of concentration camps like Sacha, Imra, Lasa and Martin, babies found in complete neglect, like Gisela, Walter and Daniel. Hundreds of Jewish and Gentile teenagers who had experienced the unimaginable. Stan had to do slave labour in Berlin, while these Polish siblings lost their parents as forced labourers in Bavaria, orphaned and all alone in a hostile country. 70 years later, they exchanged memories of their first steps back to life.
The first thing was to give them food, to give them clothing, which was difficult, food, plenty of food, and listen to their stories. And we listened to their stories days, nights. It had to come out. It had to come out. And sometimes it would take hours, to sit with them because you could not interrupt. We also were very conscious to write down their stories. Each had terrible story to tell. Terrible story. Their suffering, their separation of their parents, of their small sisters and brothers.
The UNRWA team wanted to create a therapeutic environment, physical care, a hot bath, medical treatment, a clean bed of one's own, and food.
We wanted to give the children as normal life as possible.
Above all, caring, reliable and dedicated personal relations proved to be the most important factor in regaining a feeling of security and trust in the world.
And we had knives and forks, and we discussed amongst ourselves what kind of life would the children have if their parents would be alive.
The UN volunteers lived with the children, had to be mother, father, teacher, doctor, cook and friend to these severely traumatized young people. To satisfy their physical needs to the fullest, in family-like groups. And listen to them retell the horrors branded by the Nazis on their souls. What had each of these youngsters already gone through?
Sons and daughters of the slave workers of the Hitler regime, they have become identifiable only by a number branded by the Nazis on their arms.
The tattoo KL for Konzentrationslager is still visible 70 years later.
In the camps, willpower.
Yeah.
It was only willpower. It wasn't strength. I wanted to survive and tell the world what they've done to us.
It seemed as if something burned inside them, an intense rage to live. It had helped them go through all the dangers and finally to survive.
One thing which was amazing too is the remembrance, the good things we knew and we know today, that the very early years of children are terribly important. And I very strongly believe that those children who had the early good years, they were stronger than some of the others.
Their first relations, their first experiences that they were special to others, had given them support in the camps. Now their burning desire was to find family members who might have survived. Many went home on their own.
They became very restless, and we became very anxious. We were very anxious to let them go, but there was no way of keeping them. Absolutely no way of keeping them. So we would give them papers with a lot of stamps. You know, there were different countries. There were different zones. There were the American zone, the French zone, and the British zones, and the Russian zones. And the Russian zones was a zone which was more difficult to, so we gave them big stamps on the papers to facilitate. We gave them food. Sometimes there was tremendous reunions, but there was a lot of heartache too, because so many didn't find anybody.
The heartache of being all alone in the world.
I didn't have nobody, you know. We were 10 people with my parents, and I'm the only survivor. I had nobody left, and I felt like I've got home now. You know, you know, that they want me. You know, thinking nobody wants you. You know, they only want you to live. You know, this was very emotional to me.
Kloster Indersdorff became a home where the survivors could be children again. A home on a UN island inside Germany. A home in transition. Gentile survivors could be repatriated to their home countries. Where could the Jewish survivors go?
They wanted to get out of Germany. As we said, many wanted to go to America, but America, only a very few could go because there were quotas. Each country had a quota to come to America. The world was absolutely closed, and in everybody's mind, the question always was, where can we go?
In the end, solutions had to be found. Greta Fischer stayed in touch with many and admired their resilience despite severe traumatization.
They still have the feeling they can weather any difficulties. I think they have this feeling of that they're quite powerful, that they can go without food for days, they can do anything they like. They have a lot of confidence in themselves, and I think they have proven some of their confidence by being so energetic that they did extremely well in all their ventures. Many became professional people, many went into business, into building, and all kinds, and they were very, very successful. Now, when we talk about their personal happiness, maybe they're not so communicative.
It never leaves them, what was branded by the Nazis on their souls. The survivors who returned to Kloster Indersdorff 70 years later have mastered their lives so far. First, they talk about their suffering and loss, but also about their lives before and after the Holocaust. They are living proof of how a team of UN volunteers was able to work for the benefit of young Holocaust survivors. They serve as a model for caring for traumatized children today.